Joining me now is Amy Howe, co-founder of SCOTUSBlog. Amy, welcome back to the program.
It's great to be back. Thank you.
Let's talk about this death penalty case before the court. Arguments will be heard tomorrow, starting tomorrow. We know that retired Justice Anthony Kennedy was a vote for the inmates in staying both executions. Could we see one of our first 4-4 splits here, do you think?
It's possible. I think, though, the justices are really intent at this point. We don't know when there's going to be a ninth justice, but I think that they really are probably going to be pretty focused on trying to come up with some kind of ruling, even if it's a relatively narrow one that might not make a lot of new law, because they really don't want to give the impression that they're unable to function with only 8 justices.
Well, we're waiting to see if the justices take up the Bladensburg Cross case in suburban Maryland, as Jason was mentioning. If they do, what needs to be made, what case needs to be made in order to keep the cross on public property?
I think that one case that the supporters of the cross are likely to make is that perhaps many people can agree that we shouldn't be putting up new crosses, but that this is a cross, really that this is pretty much squarely in line with a decision by Justice Stephen Breyer back in 2005 involving the 10 Commandments monument on the grounds of the Texas State Capitol, that this may be a cross, but it's part of a bigger, not only religious, but also historical and secular context, and that it's been here for over 80 years, I think, and no one's objected to it, which was something that Justice Breyer had suggested could be important in deciding whether there was a violation of the Constitution.
Just as an aside, I think many people in our audience would think that crosses should still be able to be erected.
Absolutely.
Let's just add that caveat here. Anyway, moving on. The American Bar Association 1 month ago said that Judge Brett Kavanaugh, nominee for the Supreme Court, was, quote, well qualified. Last week, the president of the ABA said, let's postpone the vote until the FBI investigation out of respect for due process. What impact is this confirmation process having on the court as it exists today, the opening day?
It was a really interesting day at the Supreme Court because there were only 8 justices. There was an empty space where the newest justice's chair would be. But other than that, it was really business as usual at the Supreme Court. The Chief Justice came out, said a few words about the start of the new term, and they went straight into oral arguments. They only had 8 justices for several months after the death of Justice Antonin Scalia, so they're kind of used to operating this way. And there wasn't really even an acknowledgement that Justice Anthony Kennedy was no longer there. He'd announced his retirement after the Supreme Court had its last public session in June, and it really was business as usual.
Perfect. Thank you so much for the report on the Supreme Court. Amy Howe, co-founder of SCOTUSBlog.
Great to see you, Lauren.